My name is Alara, and if you saw me today, you might think I've always lived a life of quiet contentment, surrounded by the gentle beauty of the royal gardens I now tend. But when I was 19, I was just a girl from the green hills of the countryside, brought to the sprawling grey maze of London, a place where I very nearly lost my life. That same visit, however, led me to the most dangerous and feared man in all of England, and it was my own quiet world of flowers and herbs that ended up saving not only the crown, but the two of us as well. Before I tell you how a simple dropped glove and a conversation whispered in the shadow of a fern could unravel a plot against the king himself, I'd love it if you'd let me know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you've ever felt like no one would ever listen to you or truly see you for who you are, maybe hit that like button for me. It means a lot to know I'm not alone. The air in London was different. It tasted of coal smoke and damp stone, a stark contrast to the clean, loamy scent of my home. I had been in the city for a month, a reluctant guest of my mother's sister Aunt Honoria, and her husband, Uncle Gideon. They had brought me here for the season, a concept as foreign and uncomfortable to me as the tightly laced corsets they insisted I wear. Their stated purpose was to find me a suitable husband, but their true mission, it seemed, was to scrub every last trace of the country from my person. My love for botany, my knowledge of herbs and roots, the calluses on my hands from tending my garden, these were all sources of profound embarrassment for them. No gentleman of quality wants a wife who smells of dirt and rabbit tobacco, Alara, my aunt would say, her voice thin and sharp as a needle. He wants a decorative, well-spoken creature who can manage a household, not one who can identify 50 varieties of moss. Their townhouse in Mayfair was a cage of gilded plaster and heavy velvet curtains that blocked out the sun. My days were a monotonous cycle of fittings for gowns in stifling shades of blush and cream, lessons in posture where I was taught to walk as if balancing a book on my head, and excruciating afternoon teas with my aunt's society friends. These women, with their powdered faces and predatory smiles, would look me over as if I were a piece of livestock, their eyes lingering on my simple hairstyle or my slightly sun-kissed skin. My contributions to conversation were deemed uncivilized. Once, when a lady complained of a headache, I had innocently suggested a tisane of feverfew and meadowsweet, a remedy my grandmother had sworn by. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ticking of the mantel clock. My aunt had later hissed at me, her fingers digging into my arm, "You are not some village hedge witch. You will hold your tongue unless spoken to, is that clear?" My uncle was no better. Gideon was a man who measured the world in coin and connections. He saw me as a poorly performing asset, an investment that was failing to yield the desired return of a profitable marriage alliance. He would sigh with theatrical exasperation when I would pause to admire the scant, struggling flowers in a city park, or when he caught me reading a botanical text instead of the society pages. "Your head is full of useless weeds, girl," he grumbled one evening, snatching the book from my hands. "Fill it with the names of eligible dukes and earls, not dandelions and dock leaves." They did not understand that for me the world of plants was not useless. It was a language. A flower was not just a decoration. It was a story of survival, of adaptation, of quiet, unyielding life. In a world where I felt invisible and voiceless, my garden was the one place I felt understood. The night of the Duke of Blackwood's annual ball was to be the pinnacle of my London experience, and consequently the pinnacle of my misery. The gown they had chosen for me was a monstrosity of silk and lace that felt like it was actively trying to suffocate me. As we rode in the carriage, my aunt issued a final litany of instructions. "Smile, but not too widely. Do not speak of nature. Do not offer any opinions. And for heaven's sake, do not wander off. You are to be presented, not to be a wallflower." The irony of her command was lost on her. All I wanted was to be a wallflower. The ballroom was a dizzying assault on the senses. 1,000 candles dripped wax from glittering chandeliers, the heat and perfume of the crush of bodies was overwhelming, and the orchestra was so loud it felt like it was vibrating in my bones. I dutifully stood by my aunt's side, curtsied to whiskered old men and insipid young dandies, and murmured polite nothings until my jaw ached from the forced smile. My uncle paraded me around like a show pony, extolling my supposed virtues, my charming innocence, my rustic health, while I felt my spirit shrink with every false word. After what felt like an eternity, I could bear it no more. My head was pounding, the air was thick and unbreathable, and the sea of faces had become a blur of judgment. Seeing my aunt momentarily distracted by a particularly gossipy countess, I slipped away, seeking refuge. I followed a less trafficked corridor, drawn by a faint, familiar scent of damp earth and greenery. At the end of the hall was a set of glass doors, and beyond them, a conservatory. It was my salvation. Stepping inside was like stepping back into my own world. The air was warm and humid, filled with the scent of jasmine and orchids. Giant ferns uncurled in the dim light, and the moonlight filtering through the glass roof painted the leaves in shades of silver and black. I wandered deeper into the miniature jungle, my fingers trailing over the waxy leaves, my shoulders finally unclenching. Here among the silent living things I could breathe. I found a small stone bench tucked away behind a magnificent Kentia palm, almost completely hidden from the doorway. I sank onto it, closing my eyes, letting the quiet hum of the conservatory soothe my frayed nerves. I do not know how long I sat there, but I was startled from my reverie by the sound of the conservatory doors opening, followed by the low murmur of male voices. My heart leaped into my throat. To be found here alone would be a scandal. My aunt would be apoplectic. My first instinct was to flee, but they were already moving further into the room, their path taking them directly past my hiding spot. Panicked, I pressed myself deeper behind the palm, its broad fronds providing a surprisingly effective screen. I held my breath, praying they would pass quickly. The two men stopped only a few feet from me. I could see them in profile through the gaps in the leaves. One was tall and thin, with a severe face and a neatly trimmed gray beard. The other was broader, more brutish, with a military posture. They clearly believed they were alone. "Is everything in place?" the tall man asked, his voice a dry whisper. "The arrangements have been made. The item will be delivered at the appointed time," the broader man replied. His accent was strange, with a hard, clipped quality I couldn't place. "He must not fail. The regent's folly has gone on long enough. This nation requires a firmer hand." "It will not fail," the broad man assured him. "The method is elegant. No one will suspect a thing until it is too late. The alchemist assures me the compound is absorbed through the skin, leaving no trace. A simple touch is all it will take." A cold dread, sharp and icy, began to creep up my spine. This was no ordinary conversation. The tall man chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "And the king will be none the wiser. He will simply feel a touch of fatigue, a bit of a swoon. By the time his physicians are called, his heart will have stopped. A tragic, natural passing for our beloved monarch." My own heart felt as though it had stopped. King. They were talking about assassinating the king. My mind reeled. This couldn't be real. It was a nightmare, a fragment of some Gothic novel I had read. But the men's voices were deadly serious. "And what of the timing?" the tall one pressed. "When the 12th bell strikes. During the ceremony. The peregrine's final flight will be his last." The peregrine. I knew from the papers that was the affectionate nickname for the king for his love of falconry. The ceremony, they must mean the dedication of the new Thames Bridge, scheduled in 2 days. The broader man made a noise of impatience. "The details are secure. My only concern is the delivery. The archbishop is a doddering fool, but his attendant is one of us. He will make the exchange." He then mentioned something that made the blood freeze in my veins. The alchemist was clever. He derived it from the monk's hood. Potent, fast, untraceable in a postmortem of the time. Aconitum napellus. Wolfsbane. Monk's hood. I knew the plant intimately. I had a small, carefully contained patch of it in the poison garden my grandmother had taught me to tend. Its beautiful purple flowers belied the deadly poison in its roots and leaves. A poison that could kill with a single touch if concentrated. My thoughts were a chaotic whirl. I had to do something. I had to tell someone. As the men turned to leave, something small and metallic slipped from the taller man's waistcoat pocket and fell silently onto the mossy flagstones. Neither of them noticed. After they were gone, I waited, my body trembling so violently I thought the palm fronds would shake. When I was certain the coast was clear, I crept out from my hiding place. My eyes fell upon the object on the floor. It was a small, flat silver case no bigger than my thumb. I picked it up with shaking fingers. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, was not a snuff box or a miniature, but a tightly rolled piece of parchment, covered in what looked like a complex cipher of numbers and symbols. I had no idea what it meant, but I knew it was important. I clutched it in my hand and fled the conservatory, my mind screaming. Finding my aunt and uncle in the swirling chaos of the ballroom took a frantic 10 minutes. I finally spotted them near the grand staircase, holding court with a group of their sycophantic friends. I rushed towards them, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Aunt Honoria. Uncle Gideon. I must speak with you. It's urgent. I tugged on my uncle's sleeve, my voice tight with panic. He turned, his face a mask of irritation at my interruption. Alara. What is the meaning of this? You look affright. Where have you been? My aunt's eyes narrowed. You have dirt on your cheek. Have you been lurking in the gardens like a stable boy? No, please, you must listen, I begged, lowering my voice. I was in the conservatory. I overheard two men. They were plotting. They're going to kill the king. The effect of my words was not what I had expected. A flicker of alarm did not cross their faces. There was no concern, no urgent questioning. There was only profound public embarrassment. My uncle's face went from annoyed to thunderous. My aunt's smile became a brittle, painted-on grimace. Hush, you foolish girl, my uncle hissed, gripping my arm painfully and steering me towards a secluded alcove. Have you lost your senses? It's true. I insisted, my voice cracking. They spoke of a poison aconitum, wolfsbane, and a ceremony and the 12th bell. My aunt followed us, her fan fluttering like a trapped bird. Stop this nonsense at once, Alara. You have an overactive imagination, always have. It is the result of filling your head with those dreadful botany books instead of proper literature. Poison plots? You've been reading too many cheap novels. But I have proof. I opened my trembling hand to show them the silver case. My uncle snatched it from me. He opened it, glanced at the coded parchment and scoffed. A trifle. Probably a dance card cipher or some lover's foolish game. You have made a spectacle of yourself, girl. We are leaving. Now. They refused to listen to another word. The ride home was a silent, suffocating ordeal. As soon as we were inside the townhouse, their fury erupted. Do you have any idea how you humiliated us tonight? Aunt Honoria shrieked, tearing her gloves from her hands. Babbling about assassinations like a madwoman. The Countess of Ashworth looked at me with such pity. Pity. You are a hysterical, attention-seeking child, Uncle Gideon snarled, pacing the drawing room. This is what comes of indulging your strange, morbid hobbies. You've concocted this fantasy to make yourself important. It wasn't a fantasy. I cried, tears of frustration and terror streaming down my face. I know what I heard. The man had a signet ring, a wyvern with its wings unfurled. The other had a strange accent from the north, perhaps. They were specific. They just stared at me with cold, disbelieving eyes. My uncle tossed the silver case onto the mantelpiece with a clatter. You will go to your room, Alara. And you will not leave it tomorrow. We will put it about that you were taken with a fever. Perhaps a few days of isolation will cool your fevered brain. I stumbled up the stairs, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. They would never believe me. To them I was just a silly country girl, my mind as uncultivated as the weeds they accused me of studying. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. But as I lay in my bed, the men's cold voices echoed in my mind. The peregrine's final flight. A simple touch is all it will take. I couldn't let it happen. If my family wouldn't help me, I had to find someone who would. And in the dark, a name surfaced from the depths of London gossip. A name whispered with fear and awe at the very tea parties my aunt forced me to attend. Lord Alistair Finch. The King's Shadow. The Spymaster. A man who, they said, listened to all of London's secrets. A man who dealt not in polite society but in harsh, brutal reality. He was my only hope. The next morning I did not wait for my fevered brain to cool. Before the sun had fully risen, while my aunt and uncle still slept, I dressed in my plainest traveling clothes, pinned the silver case securely inside my bodice and slipped out of the house. Finding Lord Finch was an ordeal in itself. He had no public office, no listing in any directory. He was a ghost, a whisper. But I was not without resources. My knowledge was not limited to plants. I was an observer of details, a skill honed by a lifetime of feeling like an outsider looking in. I remembered a snippet of conversation from one of my uncle's business acquaintances, complaining about being questioned by one of Finch's men, in a drab building near Whitehall. A place that smelled of secrets and damp wool. It was a slim lead, but it was all I had. I used the small amount of pin money I had to hire a cab to take me to the government district, a formidable landscape of gray stone and imposing facades. After an hour of walking, of asking evasive clerks and suspicious-looking men in plain coats, I found it. A narrow, anonymous building squeezed between a law office and a bookbinder. There was no nameplate on the door, only a tarnished brass number. Taking a deep breath to still the frantic beating of my heart, I knocked. The door was opened by a man whose face was a road map of old scars. He looked me up and down with an expression of profound boredom. "What do you want?" I need to see Lord Finch," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "Everyone needs to see Lord Finch," he grunted. "He's not in." He began to close the door. "Please," I said, my voice gaining a desperate edge. "It's a matter of life and death. The king's life." The man paused. He scrutinized my face for a long moment, then sighed, a sound of infinite weariness. "Wait here." He shut the door in my face. I stood on the pavement for what felt like an hour, my hope dwindling with each passing minute. Finally the door creaked open again. "He'll see you," the scarred man said with no more enthusiasm than before. "Don't waste his time." I was led through a series of dim, narrow corridors into a Spartan office at the back of the building. The room was dominated by a massive desk of dark, unpolished oak, piled high with documents and maps. The only light came from a single tall window that looked out onto a grimy brick wall. And behind the desk sat the man himself. Lord Alistair Finch was not what I had expected. He was not a hulking brute or a shadowy wraith. He was a man of medium height, lean and wiry, dressed in a perfectly tailored but severe black coat. He looked to be in his late 30s, with dark hair threaded with silver at the temples and eyes the color of a winter sky, cold, sharp and utterly devoid of warmth. A thin, pale scar cut across one eyebrow, giving him a perpetually dangerous look. He did not rise when I entered. He simply watched me, his expression a mixture of cynicism and impatience. "You have 5 minutes," he said, his voice a low, precise baritone that held no room for pleasantries. "Speak." I swallowed hard, my carefully rehearsed speech vanishing from my mind. In his presence I felt all of my 19 years, my country awkwardness, my complete and utter inadequacy. "My lord," I began, my voice trembling. "My name is Alara. I was at the Duke of Blackwood's ball last night and I overheard something." I recounted the story, the words tumbling out of me in a rush. The hidden conservatory, the 2 men, the whispered words of poison and assassination. As I spoke, his expression remained unchanged. He steepled his long, elegant fingers and listened, his gaze so intense it felt like he was dissecting me. When I finished, a long silence stretched between us. "I see," he said at last, his tone flat. "A secret meeting. A plot against the king. Whispered in a duke's conservatory." He leaned back in his chair. "Tell me, miss, what is your name again?" "Alara, my lord." "Tell me, Miss Alara, do you often find yourself swooning in conservatories? Are you, perhaps, a reader of Mrs. Radcliffe's novels? They are filled with such thrilling, Gothic encounters." My face burned with humiliation. He thought I was a liar. A hysterical girl making up stories for attention just like my aunt and uncle. "No," I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength from indignation. "It was real." "I know it was." "Of course you do," he said, a faint, mocking smile touching his lips. "The city is full of young ladies with vivid imaginations, seeing assassins in every shadow. My office is besieged by them. Now if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do." He gestured dismissively towards the door. This was it. My one chance, and I was failing. He was sending me away. Desperation clawed at me. "No, wait." I reached into my bodice and pulled out the small silver case. "They dropped this." I placed it on his desk. He glanced at it, his expression still bored. He picked it up, opened it and unrolled the small parchment. For the first time, a flicker of something, not belief but professional interest, crossed his face as he scanned the cipher. A simple substitution cipher. "Trivial," he murmured, more to himself than to me. He then looked back at me, his eyes cold again. "A trinket. It proves nothing. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. My man will see you out." He was going to dismiss me. The king was going to die. tears of sheer frustration pricked at my eyes. I would not be dismissed. Not again. I took a shaky breath. The taller man, the one who dropped it. He wore a signet ring on his left hand. A wyvern wings spread facing left. The carving was old, the details worn smooth on the upper curve. He had a small mole just below his right ear, partially hidden by his collar. When he spoke of the king, he had a nervous habit of tapping his index finger against his thumb, 3 times in succession. Lord Finch froze, his hand hovering over a letter opener. His gaze sharpened. "And the other one?" he asked, his voice losing its mocking edge. He was broader. He stood with his weight on his right leg as if his left pained him. There was a faint, almost imperceptible limp when he walked away. His boots were military style, but the leather was scuffed on the inside of the left heel, consistent with such a limp. His accent, the arth sounds were rolled, but not in the Scottish fashion. It was harder. From the Northern Territories, I think. And he smelled faintly of carbolic soap and old wool. I paused, my mind replaying the scene with perfect clarity. And the plant they mentioned, Aconitum napellus. Monk's hood. To make a contact poison, the alkaloids would have to be extracted using an alcohol solvent and concentrated into a resin. It would be sticky, faintly brown, and have a bitter, earthy smell, though it could be masked with oils. It would induce cardiac arrhythmia and respiratory paralysis within the hour. It is an exceptionally cruel and painful way to die. The silence in the room was absolute. Lord Finch stared at me, his cynical mask completely gone, replaced by an expression of stark, predatory focus. He leaned forward, his winter sky eyes boring into mine. "Say that again," he commanded, his voice a low, dangerous hum. "All of it. From the beginning. And do not leave out a single detail." He was listening. Finally, someone was listening. The hours that followed were the most grueling of my life. Lord Finch did not question me, he interrogated me. He made me recount the story a dozen times, starting from different points, asking for details so minute I couldn't imagine their relevance. What was the pattern on the damask wallpaper in the corridor? How many candles were in the sconce nearest the conservatory door? What was the precise phrasing of the taller man's laugh? He was relentless, his questions like a surgeon's scalpel, probing for weakness, for inconsistency, for the lie he was so certain he would find. But my memory, the one thing I had always possessed that was truly mine, did not fail me. I had spent a lifetime noticing the things others overlooked. The subtle droop of a water-starved leaf, the specific shade of moss on a stone, the way a person's eyes changed when they spoke a falsehood. In that room, under the Spymaster's intense scrutiny, my strange, quiet mind became my greatest weapon. I described the way the moonlight had caught a faint sheen of oil on the broader man's coat cuff. I replicated the exact cadence of their whispered conversation. I even recalled the state of the flowers in a nearby vase. 3 white roses, one of which was beginning to wilt, its outermost petal curling and browning at the edge. At some point, the scarred man, whose name I learned was Silas, brought in a tray with tea and biscuits. Lord Finch waved it away for himself but pushed a cup towards me. "Drink," he ordered. It was not a kind gesture but a practical one. He was refueling his instrument. After nearly 3 hours he seemed satisfied. He stood up and began to pace the length of the small office, his movements precise and controlled like a caged wolf. "The signet ring you described," he said, stopping to look at me. "It belongs to Viscount Marwood. His family crest is a wyvern. He has known sympathies for the northern factions who believe the king is too lenient, too weak." He tapped a finger on a large map of London that hung on one wall. "Marwood has a townhouse not 3 streets from the Duke of Blackwood's residence. It would have been a simple matter for him to attend the ball." He then turned his attention to the coded parchment. He and Silas worked on it for another hour, cross-referencing symbols with ledgers and code books I couldn't begin to understand. I sat on the hard wooden chair, exhausted but alert, watching them. The fear I had felt earlier was being replaced by a strange sense of purpose. In this grim, dangerous world, my peculiar knowledge mattered. Finally, Finch slammed a book shut. "The Peregrine's Final Flight," he said, his voice tight with grim satisfaction. "It's old military code. It means the target will be eliminated during a public procession. The dedication of the new bridge. And the 12th bell is not just the time. It is the signal. When the cathedral bell begins its 12th toll, the attempt will be made. Everything I had told him was being confirmed. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something other than suspicion or calculation in his eyes. It was a flicker of grudging respect. "Your memory is remarkable, miss." It was the closest he would come to an apology for his earlier dismissal. The investigation began in earnest. Agents were dispatched to watch Viscount Marwood and to identify his accomplice. Finch had me look through dozens of sketches of known dissidents and military men from the Northern Territories. After a long and frustrating search, I found him. "This one," I said, my finger tapping on the charcoal drawing of a man with hard eyes and a square jaw. "His face is right. And the artist has captured it here. The way he holds his shoulder slightly higher on the one side." Finch nodded curtly. "Colonel Valerius. Cashiered from the army 5 years ago for insubordination. He harbors a deep resentment against the crown. During these long sessions, a strange and reluctant partnership formed between us. He was still demanding, often curt, but he began to ask for my thoughts, not just my recollections. He would lay out a problem, how the conspirators might communicate, where they might be hiding their resources, and listen to my perspective. He learned that my mind worked differently from his agents. Where they saw strategy and motive, I saw patterns and details. I noticed that the coded messages used botanical terms as keywords. Nightshade for a dead drop, hemlock for a warning. It was a detail his own decoders had missed. One afternoon he brought me a tray of food himself. He watched me eat, a contemplative look on his face. "Why did you come to me?" he asked suddenly. "Your family, they did not believe you?" I shook my head, a familiar ache in my chest. "They believe my head is full of useless weeds. They think I am a hysterical girl." Finch's expression hardened. "There is nothing useless about the truth. And nothing hysterical about courage." His words were simple, stated as fact, but they landed in my heart like a bomb. He was the first person, other than my late grandmother, who had ever seen any strength in me. In turn, I began to see past his formidable reputation. I saw the immense weight of the secrets he carried, the exhaustion that shadowed his sharp eyes. I saw a man who had wrapped himself in cynicism as a shield against a world he knew to be cruel and treacherous. He was a lonely fortress, and for some reason I felt a desperate urge to see the man inside the walls. The danger, however, was becoming very real. One evening, an agent was sent to escort me back to my relative's townhouse to collect some of my belongings. We were in a hired carriage, turning onto a quiet street, when another carriage came hurtling around the corner at a reckless speed, its driver whipping the horses into a frenzy. It swerved directly towards us. My escort shouted, shoving me to the floor of the coach just as the other vehicle slammed into our side with a sickening crunch of splintering wood and screaming horses. Glass shattered and our carriage tipped, teetering precariously on 2 wheels before crashing back down. It was over in seconds. The other carriage did not stop. It thundered off into the night. My escort, a grim-faced man named Gregor, helped me out of the wreckage. I was shaking, bruised, but miraculously unharmed. "That was no accident," he said, his hand resting on the pistol hidden in his coat. "They know we're on to them." When Gregor brought me back to Finch's office, the Spymaster's control finally broke. Seeing me pale and trembling, he let out a string of curses that were as shocking as they were eloquent. His face was a mask of cold, white fury. "They tried to kill you," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "They put a price on your head." He strode over to me, his hands hovering as if he wanted to check for injuries but did not dare to touch me. "You are not safe. You will not return to that house." The thought of facing my aunt and uncle was dreadful, but the alternative was terrifying. "Where will I go?" "Here. We have secure rooms upstairs. You will remain here until this is over." And so, the anonymous building in Whitehall became my prison and my sanctuary. My aunt and uncle were informed by a curt message that I had been sequestered on a matter of state security. I could only imagine their apoplectic mixture of fury and social horror. The days leading up to the bridge dedication were a blur of tension and sleepless nights. We had the conspirators, the time and the place. But we were missing the most crucial piece of the puzzle: the method of delivery. How could they administer a contact poison to the king in the middle of a public ceremony, surrounded by his royal guard? We reviewed the schedule for the dedication 100 times. The king would give a speech, he would cut a ribbon with a pair of golden shears, and he would lay the final ceremonial cornerstone with a silver trowel presented to him by the Archbishop of Canterbury. The shears? The trowel? Finch mused, pacing his office. Too obvious. They would be inspected. Polished. The poison would be discovered. I closed my eyes, trying to transport myself back to the conservatory, to hear the men's voices again. I replayed every word, every inflection, every pause. Most of it was the same. The peregrine, the 12th bell, the regent's folly. But then a fragment surfaced, something I had dismissed as irrelevant. The broader man, Valerius, had been complaining. A minor, trivial complaint. What was it? I whispered, my eyes still closed. Something about flowers. My eyes snapped open. That's it. He complained about the overpowering scent of the lilies that were to be used to decorate the royal dais. Finch looked at me confused. Lilies? What of them? They are harmless. Exactly, I said, my mind racing. They are harmless, but their scent is strong. Very strong. Strong enough to mask another, fainter scent. Like the bitter, earthy smell of a concentrated aconitum resin. Finch stopped pacing. A distraction for the nose. Go on. The Archbishop is presenting the trowel, I continued, the pieces clicking into place. You said yourself the trowel would be inspected. But what if it's not the one they inspect? They spoke of the Archbishop's attendant. He is one of us, they said. He will make the exchange. The attendant will have the poisoned trowel. He will swap it for the clean one at the very last second, just before the Archbishop takes it. The king will take the trowel, the poison on the handle will absorb through his gloves, through his skin. He'll feel faint and everyone will blame the heat, the long ceremony. By the time they realize it's something more, it will be too late. Alistair stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and profound admiration. By God, he whispered. It's brilliant. Subtle, simple, and utterly diabolical. He looked at me, truly looked at me, and I saw in his gaze the complete collapse of his fortress. The jaded Spymaster was gone, and in his place was a man who saw me not as a hysterical girl or a useful instrument, but as an equal. Ilara, he said, and the sound of my name on his lips was different this time, softer. You have just saved the king's life. But the plot wasn't foiled yet. We still had to stop it. The day of the bridge dedication dawned gray and overcast, the sky a sheet of unpolished pewter. A nervous energy crackled through the city, but for the cheering crowds lining the Thames, it was a day of celebration. For us, it was a day of reckoning. Finch and his men were a study in controlled tension. They moved with quiet efficiency, taking up their positions among the crowd, disguised as dockworkers, city officials, and even members of the press. Finch himself was dressed as a captain of the Royal Guard, a position that gave him proximity to the king and a plausible reason to command the men around him. He had been adamant that I remain in the safe house. It is too dangerous, he had insisted, his jaw tight. They tried to kill you once. If they see you. And what if I see something you miss? I had argued, my voice shaking but firm. I am the only one who has seen their faces, who has heard their voices. I might notice an attendant who doesn't belong, a gesture that is out of place. I started this, my lord. Allow me to see it through. He had stared at me for a long time, a war of duty and a fierce newfound protectiveness raging in his eyes. Finally he had relented. Very well, he'd conceded, his voice rough. But you will not be on the dais. I will place you in the bell tower of the nearby church. You will have a clear view of the entire ceremony. Silas and Gregor will be with you. You will not move from that spot. You are there to observe, nothing more. Is that understood? I had agreed, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and determination. From my vantage point in the dusty, quiet bell tower, the scene below looked like a grand, intricate tapestry. The newly completed bridge was festooned with banners that flapped in the breeze. The royal dais was a sea of crimson and gold, surrounded by the stern, unmoving lines of the guard. I could see Finch, a tall, imposing figure near the king's podium, his eyes constantly scanning, missing nothing. My own eyes searched the crowd, my gaze sweeping over the sea of faces, looking for Viscount Marwood or Colonel Valerius. I spotted Marwood among a group of nobles, looking perfectly at ease, chatting with a duchess. Valerius was nowhere to be seen. The minutes ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. The opening speeches droned on. The crowd cheered at the appropriate moments. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned and my nerves were stretched to the breaking point. Had we been wrong? Had they changed the plan? Then the cathedral clock began to chime the noon hour. 1, 2, 3. With each toll of the great bell above my head, a fresh wave of dread washed over me. I scanned the area around the dais again, my eyes locking onto the figure of the elderly Archbishop of Canterbury, who was now moving towards the podium, ready to present the ceremonial trowel. Beside him walked a younger, stooped attendant, carrying the silver trowel on a velvet cushion. I watched the attendant, my breath catching in my throat. He was just a man, unremarkable in every way. But then he shifted his weight and I saw it. The slightest, almost imperceptible dip in his left shoulder as he took a step. The limp. It was Valerius, disguised as a clergyman. My blood ran cold. My gaze darted to Finch. He was watching Marwood. He hadn't seen. Valerius was hidden in plain sight, a wolf in sheep's clothing. I watched, horrified, as the Archbishop took the trowel from the cushion. The exchange had already been made. The Archbishop was now carrying the poisoned instrument, an unwitting agent of death. 7, 8, 9. The bells tolled on, counting down the seconds of the king's life. Valerius was already beginning to melt back into the crowd of clergy, his eyes fixed on a small boat moored beneath the bridge, his escape route. I had to warn Finch. But how? Silas and Gregor stood like statues beside me, their orders absolute. I couldn't shout. The wind and the crowd would swallow the sound. 10. The king turned with a benevolent smile, reaching for the trowel. My mind screamed. I had to do something. I was an observer, nothing more. That was the order. But watching was not enough. Not now. In a flash of desperate inspiration, my eyes fell on a pile of discarded lumber and old scaffolding planks left by the workmen near the base of the tower. Among them was a large ornate stone urn filled with sand, used as a counterweight. It was heavy, precariously balanced. 11. Without a second thought, I broke away from my guards. "Miss, stop." Silas hissed, reaching for me, but I was too quick. I scrambled towards the edge of the bell tower's open archway, putting all my weight against the massive stone urn. It resisted for a moment and then, with a deep groan, it tipped over the edge. It fell for what felt like an eternity, then landed on the scaffolding below with a cataclysmic crash of splintering wood and shattering stone. The sound was like a cannon shot. A woman in the crowd below screamed. Then another. The noise and the sudden chaos rippled through the ceremony. Everyone, including the king, flinched and turned towards the sound of the disruption. He paused, his hand hovering inches from the gleaming silver trowel. The diversion was all Finch needed. His head whipped around, his eyes finding me in the bell tower. He saw my frantic pointing finger, aimed not at Marwood, but at the robed figure of Valerius slipping towards the riverbank. In a split second of brilliant, deadly calculation, Finch understood everything. "Seize him," he roared, his voice cutting through the din. He didn't wait for the guards. He moved with a speed that was terrifying, covering the distance to the dais in 3 long strides. He knocked the trowel from the bewildered Archbishop's hand, sending it clattering to the ground, and shoved the king back behind a wall of now alert guards. At his command, his own disguised men converged. One team, wearing gloves, carefully retrieved the trowel. Another team descended on the riverbank, tackling Valerius just as he was about to cast off in the boat. Seeing the plan had collapsed, Marwood and his fellow conspirators tried to bolt, only to be swiftly and brutally apprehended by other agents who seemed to materialize from the crowd itself. Chaos reigned. The crowd was panicking, the royal guard was forming a protective circle around the pale but unharmed king, and Finch's men were securing the prisoners. In the midst of it all, Finch's eyes found mine again across the distance. I was trembling, my body racked with adrenaline and shock, but I stood my ground. He was no longer the king's guard captain, he was Alistair. And the look on his face was not anger at my insubordination. It was a look of profound, staggering relief, of undisguised admiration, and something more, something deeper and more personal that made my heart ache. The 12th bell finally tolled, its sound not a death knell but a proclamation of victory. He gave me a short, sharp nod, a gesture that spoke volumes. "You did it." In the heart of London, surrounded by chaos, the shy country girl and the jaded spymaster had saved the crown. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The king was whisked away to safety, the prisoners were taken to a secure location for interrogation, and I was escorted from the bell tower by a silent, grim-faced Gregor, who now looked at me with a newfound respect. He took me back to the anonymous building in Whitehall, back to the Spartan office that had become the unlikely center of my world. Finch arrived an hour later. He looked exhausted, his borrowed captain's uniform was askew, but his eyes were alight with a fierce energy. "It's done," he said, his voice raw. Valerius confessed. He implicated Marwood and the entire faction. The trowel was coated with a concentrated resin of aconitum, just as you predicted. The plot is completely unraveled. He poured 2 glasses of brandy, handing one to me. My hand shook so much that the liquid sloshed over the rim. He gently took the glass from me, set it down, and then took my hand in his. His touch was warm and steady. "You were magnificent, Ilara." He said it simply, a statement of undeniable fact. "Your courage today, it was beyond anything I have ever witnessed." I could only shake my head, overwhelmed. I was terrified. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said softly, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. "It is acting in spite of it." The next day a royal summons arrived. The king wished to meet me. Finch escorted me to the palace himself. He had procured a gown for me, a simple but elegant dress of deep forest green that made me feel less like a country mouse and more like myself. The palace was opulent and intimidating, but with Alistair at my side I found I was not afraid. The king was an elderly man with kind, tired eyes. He sat in a comfortable chair, a blanket over his knees, looking more like a grandfather than a monarch. He dismissed his attendants, leaving just the 3 of us in the room. "Miss Ilara," he said, his voice gentle. "Lord Finch has told me everything. It seems I owe you a debt that can never truly be repaid. You saved my life." I curtsied, murmuring something about it being my duty. He smiled. "Nonsense. It was an act of extraordinary bravery and intelligence. I wish to grant you a reward. Name anything, and if it is within my power, it is yours." I was stunned. I had never thought of a reward. My mind went blank. All I could think of was the quiet green of my home. "Your Majesty," I said hesitantly. I want nothing. Only to be able to return to my garden." The king chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. "A humble spirit to match a brave one. But I cannot simply let you go. Lord Finch told me of your particular expertise. Your knowledge of botany." He leaned forward. "The position of royal botanist at my Kensington estate has been vacant for some time. I would be honored if you would accept it. You would have your own greenhouses, your own gardens, and a staff to assist you. You could cultivate any plant in the kingdom. It was a dream I had never dared to have. A life dedicated to the one thing I loved, sanctioned and supported by the king himself." Tears welled in my eyes. "I accept, Your Majesty," I whispered. "Thank you." My final task in London was to retrieve my belongings from my aunt and uncle. Alistair insisted on accompanying me. When the butler opened the door and saw me standing on the step with the formidable Lord Finch at my side, his eyes widened in shock. We were shown into the drawing room where my aunt and uncle were waiting. Their faces were pinched with fury and embarrassment. "Ilara, what is the meaning of this?" my aunt began, her voice shrill. "Disappearing. The scandal. We have been beside ourselves. And who is this gentleman?" "Aunt Honoria, Uncle Gideon," I said, my voice steady. "This is Lord Finch." My uncle's face went pale. He knew the name. "Lord Finch is here to ensure my things are packed without incident," I continued calmly. "I will be leaving your house today." "Leaving?" my uncle sputtered. "After the trouble you've caused? Where in God's name would you go?" Alistair stepped forward. "Miss Ilara is now under the direct protection of the crown," he stated, his voice as cold and hard as granite. "His Majesty has seen fit to grant her the royal appointment of botanist at Kensington Estate. She will not be returning." The transformation was instantaneous and grotesque. Their anger vanished, replaced by a fawning, grasping sycophancy. "Kensington!" Aunt Honoria gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Oh, our darling Ilara. A royal appointment. We always knew you had such hidden talents." "Indeed," my uncle boomed, smiling broadly. "A keen mind, that's what I've always said. We are so very proud." I looked at them, at their false smiles and greedy eyes, and I felt nothing but a profound and weary pity. They didn't see me. They only saw my proximity to power. They were strangers. "I'm glad you are pleased," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "My things are in my room. I will have them sent for." I turned to leave. "But darling, you must stay for tea," my aunt cried, rushing forward. "We must celebrate. You must tell us all about His Majesty." I paused at the door and looked back at them one last time. "No thank you, Aunt. I do not believe we will be seeing each other again." And with that I walked out of their house, out of their lives, and did not look back. Alistair was waiting for me, and as we walked away into the London afternoon, I felt the sun on my face, truly free for the first time. 6 months passed. The chill of winter gave way to the tentative warmth of spring, and in my new life I blossomed. The gardens and greenhouses of the Kensington estate became my kingdom. I spent my days with my hands in the rich soil, surrounded by the quiet, steady work of growing things. The shyness that had once defined me had not vanished, but it had softened, transforming into a quiet confidence. I was respected for my knowledge, my work was valued, and for the first time I felt truly at home in my own skin. I corresponded with botanists across the continent, curated a collection of rare medicinal herbs, and found a deep, abiding joy in the simple, profound magic of a seed sprouting into life. Alistair visited often. He would appear in the late afternoons, having left his grim office in Whitehall, and find me in one of the glass houses. He would walk with me through the rows of exotic plants, listening as I explained the properties of a rare fern or the origins of a vibrant orchid. He never pretended to understand the intricacies of my world, but he listened with an intensity and respect that meant more than any feigned expertise. In the warm, humid air of the greenhouses, away from the shadows and secrets of his own life, the fortress around him seemed to melt away. The dangerous Spymaster became just Alistair, a man with a wry, unexpected sense of humor and a deep weariness in his eyes that was slowly beginning to fade. He was changing. The hard, cynical edge was softening, replaced by a quiet warmth that was reserved only for me. One day he arrived carrying a small, carefully wrapped package. He found me in the orchid house, tending to a delicate spray of blossoms. "I have something for you," he said, his usual formality gone, his voice gentle. He handed me the package. Inside, nestled in soft wool, was a small, potted plant. It had a single magnificent flower, a bloom of such a deep velvety black that it seemed to drink the light. It was a black orchid, one of the rarest and most sought-after flowers in the world. I stared at it, speechless. Procuring such a specimen would have required immense effort and expense. It was not a gift of jewels or gold, things he could have easily acquired. It was a gift that spoke my own language. It was a gift that said, "I see you. I understand you, Alistair," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "It's beautiful. I was told it is notoriously difficult to cultivate," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "It requires patience and a specific, understanding hand." It reminded me of someone. He stepped closer, the scent of rain on his coat mixing with the earthy perfume of the orchids. "Elara," he began, his voice serious now. "What you did not just save the king. You did not just stop a plot." He paused, searching for the words. "You rescued me. I was adrift. In a world of lies and shadows for so long, I had forgotten that things like goodness and courage could exist so quietly, so honestly." He took a deep breath. "I have tendered my resignation from my current post. My work will be more domestic now. Overseeing palace security. It will keep me in London." The implication hung in the warm air between us, as clear and fragile as the glass of the greenhouse. He was staying for me. He reached out and gently took my hand, his fingers lacing through mine. He looked at me, his winter sky eyes no longer cold, but filled with a profound and steady warmth. "I find I have no desire to be anywhere you are not." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the silent, beautiful life I had cultivated, a new seed was planted. The future was unwritten, a garden yet to be tended, but as I looked into his eyes I knew with absolute certainty that it would be a future filled with hope, with respect, and with a love that had taken root in the most unlikely of soils. And that is my story. It's how my seemingly useless knowledge saved a life, and how a quiet girl who was never truly seen found someone who saw everything. It taught me that your worth is not determined by those who refuse to see it. Sometimes, the skills that others dismiss are the very things that make you powerful. So what about you? Have you ever had a passion or a skill that others thought was strange or useless, only to find it was your greatest strength? I would be honored if you would share your story in the comments below. Hearing from you means the world to me. And if my story resonated with you, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you all the strength to cultivate your own beautiful, unique gardens, no matter what anyone else says.